All right, so here we have our next episode, and I'm super excited about this one um, because this really, for me, is a critical and foundational piece of chiropractic and really medical history. And even to this day, provides a lot of like framework and relevance, I think, to not only me and you as chiropractors, but our patients and the community at large. So what we're going to be talking about today is the antitrust lawsuit that that a small group of chiropractors went up against the AMA, and it's truly a story of David and Goliath mixed with Law and Order, mixed with Cloak and Dagger, mixed with John Grisham novels, and really like a made-for-TV, or a movie, really quality a level of story. And yeah, so we're going to go through that. But, first of all, so we learned about this in school. And so, Dr. V, why don't you kind of share with what you remember, and then I'll fill in the cracks.
Yeah, well, or the holes.
Yeah, right.
Um, well, we in school we take tons of classes, but one of the ones that we have to take is called the history of chiropractic. And the history of chiropractic is in itself is really, really cool. I don't know if we're going to dive into that during this talk, but we should because
Yeah.
it is kind of amazing.
Yeah. Yeah.
But whenever we were going through that, we of course learned about this huge lawsuit, and it was like chiropractors versus the AMA. And the AMA is still what it is today, the
Mhm.
huge medical association that pretty much every doctor that you have probably looks to for guidance and has to follow their rules. So it really does kind of govern that entire medical society. And so to have like a small group of chiropractors take them to court and take them down is amazing. But
Mhm.
I think like the things that I remember were like I remember asking, like, why did this even start? Why did the AMA come after chiropractors?
Yeah.
And it's because, or at least from what I remember, was because we were actually doing like a better job than they were doing at taking care of their patients. And
Mhm.
they were upset because they felt like we were practicing medicine, although we weren't prescribing drugs, we weren't doing surgeries, we were only doing chiropractic care. But they, I guess, assumed or thought we must be doing something else, or that chiropractic was somehow falling under that medical model. So yeah, that we there was lots of stuff that went on between both sides, and I think some chiropractors were even jailed for some part of it
Yeah.
before ultimately we went to court. And I think it kind of had to go all the way up, right, to the
Mhm.
supreme level before we actually got a verdict that was in our favor.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're about to really tell them what happened. Was I
Well,
wrong? Are there any
n-
big pieces that I missed?
no, you were mostly right, but I mean, that's how I remembered it as well. I mean, I took my classes even longer than, you be. So like those are really the highlights, but really like the foundation of the lawsuit and really like the aftermath is also really interesting. But um, the AMA really came, into power and took over the medical community, like, I mean, darn near 100 years ago. I mean, this goes back into the Flexner Report and the Carnegie Foundation, and how, the Rockefellers, and how they really, and this could be a different, call, but essentially they wiped off the face of the map, like homeopathy, naturopathy, which were largely taught in medical schools, or they were only taught in medical schools back in the early 1900s. And when, the head honchos, the powers that be, I mean, the richest people in the world really wanted to shift our society from, natural base really to pharmaceutical base. They went through this. So that's really when the AMA then was able to like make its power. And like every back in the day, I mean, and still to this day, probably every medical doctor is a part of the American Medical Association. And so it's just this huge organization. Um, but as many people know, I mean, I think many people sort of erroneously think that there is like this rift between chiropractors and medical doctors, that like we don't get along, we don't hate each other. I mean, really that like that's not true. But you are right. So what happened was in the early 1900s, the chiropractic profession really started, went from this like fledgling thing, and it really grew in popularity and started to economically encroach on medical doctors who had, let's just call it a monopoly for for a long time. And so within the American Medical Association, there was some members that formed what became known as, and this is literally what it was called. It was called the Committee on Quackery. And so within this, there was this subgroup that their sole mission was to contain and eliminate, right? That's why the name of the book, that I kind of studied up on is called that, to contain and eliminate the chiropractic profession. And so in the early days, the early to mid 1900s, really up until this lawsuit was finalized, it was completely legal for a medical doctor to, without any repercussion, completely slander chiropractic in general, or even specific chiropractors in their hometown. So it was not uncommon where medical doctors would literally take out full page, ads in the newspaper saying like, don't go to chiropractors, they will kill you, they non-scientific, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what they were also able to do, and this became the commonplace in what the American Medical Association told their members, which, keep in mind, remember, was like pretty much every single medical doctor, was that if any of your patients, if you knew they were seeing a chiropractor, you should stop seeing them, or tell the patients, if they don't stop seeing the chiropractor, that you will kick them out of your practice. And so chiropractors at the time, and it's really still to this day, it's not really any different, wanted to, join forces, and all for the greater good of just helping people make sure they be able to make choices for their health and do whatever they felt was best. And if some people might recall, like a long time ago, or really not that long ago, all like major hospitals used to be public, which meant taxpayer dollars funded them. And so something like an x-ray machine, for example, which still are expensive, but even, 50 years ago were way more expensive. So like the average solo business owner or small chiropractic practice would not be able to afford to buy their own x-ray machine. And so what they would have to do is then, if they needed an x-ray of a patient, which, most chiropractors would want every patient to have that, they would refer to the hospital so the patient could get the x-rays done. Well, radiologists and hospitals would just, like, most of the time flat out refuse, to do that. So what really started as this sort of economic encroachment from the eyes of the medical association, if you will, it really evolved into this patient safety, and really withholding patients from being able to have access to services that would benefit them. And so, which ultimately would become the dagger in the heart of this lawsuit, was that the judges ruled that, which I'll talk about more in a couple of minutes. And so I kind of think about, the climate that we are in today here in 2024. I mean, it still is hard enough to practice, alternative medicine, right? Or basically non-pharmaceutical medicine. And what just happened there? I got some sparkles for that one. Did you see that? Okay.
Was that
So
from Fernand?
I guess so. Yeah. Emoji or something. That was funny. It still is challenging to do that because, even if you are correct in what you're saying, you can get, brought through the ringer of scrutiny and having to prove it and fortify that. Whereas, the average medical doctor doesn't really have that risk, for practicing that the way that they practice. But I mean, imagine like literally having, your patients told, like, if you keep going to that chiropractor, that quack, because they could say that legally without any, again, repercussion, I'm not going to see you anymore. And so this is where I really think, and in hindsight, I think it was amazing for our profession, and why our profession became largely attracting people who have servant hearts versus really like, I'm doing this because it's a good job, and I can make a lot of money, or I'm going to be a doctor or whatever it is. But really it was a servant, because the lawyer who ultimately took the case to attack the AMA, his dad was a chiropractor. So he grew up hearing, the people in public literally call his dad a quack. He remembers driving in the middle of the night and going to a farmer's farm to adjust a farmer that had a bad back that couldn't work or whatever. And so, because they'd have to do it in secret so that nobody could ever catch, or see or claim that, they were being seen. So they really had to operate in secrecy in many towns to earn their income, provide for their family, and really, help the public. So it's just kind of wild to think about that, but really how there's still some stigma that, carries, over, to this day. So, this went on for a very long time, and eventually, a very small percentage of chiropractors actually kind of got I don't know, the bravery, if you will, to actually approach some law firms to try to take this to court. But you could imagine that it was hard to get chiropractic support, like you can get the funds for it, because most chiropractors thought this is like, well, David and Goliath, we're not going to win. It's just going to be a waste of money. If we lose, it's going to look even worse for us then. Like it's going to prove everything that they've been saying about us, because if it's in court, like then it's like, it's the end all be all. But also no law firms would take it on, because as most law firms said, it's like, well, all of our highest paying clients really are in the medical, world. And so, and it would be conflict of interest. We can't take this case, right? So eventually they found this chiropractor McAndrews, whose dad was a chiropractor and he was a patent lawyer. So he wasn't really like, an antitrust specialist, but because he had grown up seeing his dad do all these things, he's like, well, I'm going to do this. Now his partners in his law firm are like, don't you dare take this. This is going to be a drag on our firm. It's going to, drag us through the mud. They're not, these teeny chiropractors are not going to be well-paying, high-paying clients. So it's going to be a waste of time and waste of money. But he's just like, listen, he's like, I got to do this. And so, now, but they didn't have evidence, right? So that this was actually a coordinated effort to do this. So while we knew publicly that medical doctors were slandering chiropractors, that they were doing all these things, there was never like a document that was circled around, telling these medical doctors to do this. It was just setting convention. So it was nothing that would be admissible to court. And this is where the smoking gun or the cloak and dagger thing comes into play. So around this same time, this is when the Church of Scientology really, had its, begins. I don't know much about the Church of Scientology other than there's some movie stars that do it, and it's kind of, different in their beliefs or whatever. But this is like when it was in its heyday, at least when the founder was still alive. And so L. Ron Hubbard, the founder of Scientology, knew that, or believed that, the medical association was trying to, do what the chiropractors kind of thought they were doing, like slander and say, oh, Scientology people are weird, be careful about them. Because I think the Church of Scientology did have some views on health, right, that, they would teach their members. So again, I don't know a lot about it, but for whatever reason, he thought the medical community was against it. So what the Church of Scientology did was planted moles within the American Medical Association, and then as history found out, like in like every single major government organization, to essentially spy on behalf of the Church of Scientology, so they could kind of try to be ahead if there were anything. So they were in the FBI, the CIA, they were in every branch of government in the American Medical Association. So there was this Church of Scientology member who was planted in the American Medical Association and got super deep into it, like, ultimately to board level, and was starting to, go through the documents, figure this out. Well, they didn't actually find anything that was, damning or like proof that they were going after the Church of Scientology. But that's when the documents were discovered, the internal documents were discovered about the coordinated, systematic effort to take down the chiropractic profession. And so now this was also going around as the same time as like Watergate and like the scandal with the, Nixon and all this stuff too. So there was just a lot of this stuff, going on in the press. And so this guy started leaking these things to the press about, the issues within the American Medical Association. They owed $21 million in back taxes, and they were having some struggles, and there was other controversies and things too. But at the same time, it started leaking this to the chiropractic profession and saying, hey, you guys might want to be aware of this. And the chiropractors were like, well, we already know this is going on, but now we have the proof for that. So, skipping kind of a lot of the like really technical details, ultimately
wasn't one of the things that they found, like the actual committee for quackery?
Correct. Yeah. So it was like uncover the members, their memos, their what would you call them? Their minutes of their meeting, right? Like their official, like, here's what we talked about and here's what we're going to do.
Like,
You know,
just to summarize, in case if anyone's getting lost in the weeds, which hopefully you're not, because the story is incredible. The AMA had a committee solely dedicated to pretty much talking crap and slandering the chiropractic profession.
and eliminate us. Like their goal is
Yes.
not just to make us
Yes.
look bad, it was to wipe us off the face of the like map, like nuclear bomb us. So yeah, crazy. So eventually the evidence, you know, they got it legally, right? They were able to do these things. And so they you know, a small group of chiropractors, the main one was named Chester Wilkes. So you can look this up. It's you know, Wilk et al. Versus the AMA. That's the name of the you know, the court case, right? And Chester Wilk was his name, doctor of chiropractic. So they you know, they brought it in. They did they filed the lawsuit in Illinois, in Chicago specifically, because that's where AMA is headquartered. So they're like, we're not only going to take these guys down, we're going to take them down in their backyard on their home turf, because we have to have a decisive victory. So, you know, the legal kind of readings about the you know, it really like reads like how you'd witness this if you were watching like a law, you know, TV show. Is here you have these 4 chiropractors as the plaintiffs, right? So they're the ones suing, right? And their like team of like 4 or 5 lawyers show up in court. And then you have the members of the AMA who are being sued, the board members, right? Yet, and they had 50 lawyers that were, so they literally had to bring like 5 tables so that all of the lawyers could sit around like in the courtroom. And here's this like little group with 5 lawyers of, you know, of the chiropractors lawyers. So, and not only that, they hired the biggest, baddest law firm. I mean, literally the guy, the head defendant for the AMA, is, his last name is Wildman. And you know, they were talked about, and you know, this guy was like, he had like a tongue of gold, like he could sway juries, like, and just win over, like he could, you know, make people believe, you know, even if they were innocent, he could make them believe if they were guilty. Is like, if they were guilty, he could make them believe they were innocent. It was just like, he just had a way with words that was literally world renowned at this point. So they literally got the best of the best, you know, for this.
Against a lawyer who wasn't even like a trial lawyer.
Right.
He was a
Yeah.
patent lawyer. He didn't even like these type of cases.
Correct. Yep. So, but he just knew he had to do it. And again, with his law firm saying, you shouldn't take this case because we don't want you to. But so now during this whole time, right, the judge, so there was a jury, and the judge erroneously from the get-go said, what we want to do is, I want you guys to disregard, and this is like the judge briefing the jury before the trial really starts. I want you to disregard, sorry, remember that free speech, like the First Amendment, is okay. So basically, he set the precedent that whatever the medical doctors were saying would fall under free speech, and not anything else. So the chiropractic, the plaintiffs had to do an uphill battle, because the medical doctors could keep going back saying, oh, well, we're free to say whatever, you know, wherever we want to say, and all these things. And so, long story short, in the first trial with the jury, we lost. The chiropractors lost. But the judge over the weekend was, this is how it played out, was literally so distraught over the error that he made in setting the ground rules for the case, because he can't really say this, but he basically said it without saying, is like, you need to appeal this, because like, I made a mistake. And so, and even 2 members of the jury hunted down McAndrews, the lawyer for the chiropractors, and they were sobbing, and they were like, we couldn't believe we had to vote the way that we did, but we had to, based on what the judge told us how we had to view the case, you know, through the lens. So they appealed it, and this time they did it without a jury. And yada yada yada. I'll kind of skip, you know, the details. Is that when they got rid of the jury and it was just onto the facts and not really playing to the emotions of the jury, that the facts were proven, you know, and the judge ruled irrefutably, a new judge irrefutably, that there had been a systematic, you know, coordinated effort for the AMA to, destroy and wipe off the map the chiropractic profession. And what her main points were as to sort of like laying down the hammer on this lawsuit is that, yes, there were economic damages to chiropractors for doing this, but she said the greatest slight, the greatest insult, the greatest damages were to the public at large. And because of the actions of the AMA, potentially millions of people were denied access, or at least the information regarding how chiropractic care could have been a benefit to their health. So she said the reason why the lawsuit went the way that was is because the public had been harmed because of the actions by the AMA, just as much so as the chiropractors themselves had been harmed from this too. So, I mean, I think that is just so cool. And they were, that there's so many, again, I read like 170 pages of this stuff, that I read. But, you're reading this, and even though I know the outcome, it's like I was like fist pumping and just like reading all the things because we won. And then the AMA, of course, were like, well, we're not happy with that judgment. So they tried to bring it to the highest level of the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court denied it because they said the ruling was sound, and like everything that the judge had ruled was like, yep, that's like we're not going to overturn this because she made the correct call with that, and we don't want to hear anything more about it. So there's a couple things I took away from this that like I didn't really think about it. Like I knew that we won, but I didn't know that we lost first. I forgot that detail. And I think like in many cases in life, especially when you're the underdog, if you lose, even though you're right, if somebody else says you're wrong and a high authority, it can be very easy as the underdog to then just pack it up at that point and say, nah, it's not worth it to go at this. Like, well, I guess we're just going to have to figure it out and deal with it. But it's like when you're right, and even though you're told you're wrong, oh my gosh, am I going to make the sparkles fly again? When you're wrong, like if you believe in that principle and you believe in that, it's like, well, that you can't stop fighting it until you either die or you come to the conclusion that, yeah, what, maybe what I was wrong. And so I'm just so proud of our profession for surviving this onslaught. And this went on. Remember, this started in like the early 1900s, and this lawsuit wasn't finalized until like 1989. Like I was like in kindergarten when this lawsuit finally finalized. It took almost 90 years of effort to get to that point, of changing the way, I guess, the public relationship, if you will, between these two groups for the benefit of people, right? And so I'm just so proud of our profession for just sticking, through it, sticking through jailings and having to have full page ads taking them out and slandering them and having their patients told, your chiropractor is going to kill you, so stop going or we're going to stop seeing you. And it's like they just kept on trucking. And I think it also enhances or highlights the benefit that chiropractic provides, is because despite having people in authority tell the public don't do this because they're going to kill you, people kept going because it obviously just freaking works, right? And so it's like the truth prevailed, even though the information was saying everything contrary to that. It's like, well, the public ultimately knew that, hey, this works for me, this works for my family. Like, I'm not going to stop going, even if it means I have to like go in secret, go in the back alley, and not tell anybody that I'm doing this, so that like whatever. So yeah, that's the story, or that's the Cliff Notes version anyways of the story of how you and I are able to practice today without whatever, for the most part. And I think the bigger thing is that for the people that are watching this, that are chiropractic patients, is that, they get to be a patient in the office, in a chiropractic office, and not have repercussions in their own lives, for that. And they get to just ultimately decide for themselves if it's something that is good for them, or not. Yeah.
That was like my biggest takeaway, was like we were literally not just fighting for the profession, but fighting for the patients to just be able to choose what they want to do with their health.
Yep.
And there's so many details during this, but I do remember in school learning about like there were people in the like within the AMA, very high up people who were going to chiropractors like
Yeah.
during it's like they were still talking crap, but they were like didn't the person who created the Mayo Clinic like have to bring his wife to a chiropractor and it
Yeah.
worked?
Yep. Yep. Because it wasn't working. So they drove from Rochester, Minnesota down to Davenport, Iowa, which, by car nowadays is like whatever, 4 or 5 hours maybe, but back then, who knows? Um, and the chiropractor got her well. But yeah, to your point, one of the witnesses was an orthopedic surgeon who was working with the US military, and they found with their data that people that got injured, during war, this would have been during the Korean War, got back on the battlefield way quicker when they were adjusted. And what happened was the Committee on Quackery took those documents, because this guy was a medical doctor, but he was like they were just trying to help people, and they buried it because they didn't want that information to go out to the rest of the medical profession. So they suppressed beneficial research that I think the average doctor who cares about their patients would want to know, like, the truth about that, but they suppressed that and they never circulated that and put it in the Journal of American Medical Association, right? And so like that was one of the things that was highlighted as to what the judge said is like, yeah, people suffered because they didn't know this information.
It's so true. And it's so sad because how many, I mean, we're talking about not just a patient now, but someone who's literally fighting for our country,
Yeah.
who's just trying to go back out and do it. And you're like suppressing this information because you think it makes your society look bad.
Yeah.
Like, like let's just look at the bigger picture, like the patient, the person who's struggling.
Yeah. And I know, like sometimes like maybe the like philosophy of this, or the like esoteric, tangible, like me as a patient, who cares? Like I'm here, I'm getting adjusted, I like it. But I think sometimes like if you feel like chiropractic hopefully has benefited you, hopefully this story kind of gives you maybe that much more of a deeper appreciation, where if a few things would have gone the wrong way, like, yeah, our profession might have been eliminated and wiped off the map, and therefore you would not have a solution, an alternative solution, if you will, or the best solution for you and your family to get well. I mean, it just all it would have taken, is a few things to go not in our favor for their plan to have worked, and wiped us out, or at least largely wiped us out enough where we wouldn't be, there wouldn't be enough of us to be able to take care of the people, that needed it, right? So, yeah, crazy
So
story.
there to now, how do you just feel personally with how chiropractic and like medical doctors, we'll just say like the AMA, we'll put everyone in there,
Yeah,
like our relationship is? Because I feel like personally, I've have found more and more doctors are actually referring patients to us.
yeah,
What's your experience, or how do you feel about it?
yeah. I think for the most part, if I look broadly, most medical doctors are apathetic, meaning they don't have a super strong um, position on our place, if you will.
I think that's
But the vast majority are always supportive if to the patient, like, oh, if you think it's helping, like keep going. And I'm always like, well, like, who cares? We don't need their like permission slip to keep doing this. But at the same time, it's good. I think that they still are woefully undereducated about what it is that we do, number one. And so like I don't even like, so it's kind of left up to the medical doctor to do their own research to really know what a chiropractor does. And I've always find that anybody from the medical community that makes their way into my office, if they're even negative or neutral, always flip positive, because when they get an understanding of what it is that we're actually doing, they're always in complete agreement that the nervous system controls everything. And if there's a way to make that system work better, be more efficient, right? Like they're in support of that for a person's overall health. So when they, if their thought process is limited to, oh, like they crack a neck or crack a back and pray that the patient gets better. If that's all they think about us, well, then yeah, I could see why you wouldn't be like all about referring, they wouldn't be about referring their patients, to us. But the ones that really understand it and take the time to learn like what it is that we do, like they're always like, yeah, this makes perfect sense. And if you ask me, sometimes I think they get a little bit jealous that they don't have the ability to do what it is that we, execute on. That's just my opinion though.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Oh,
Chester
great.
Wilk, McAndrews, Chester Wilk versus the AMA. We won. We're here today because of that. You as a patient are here today because of that. And it's a beautiful thing. The David and Goliath story, never gets old, even when it's playing out in, modern times too. So, there's a lot of battles.
Anyone call us a quack, the story to tell them. Where
Exactly. There's a lot of battles still to be won, in my opinion, for, the natural health community to really take its rightful place as the one, as like the thought process in charge of health, if you will. But, to this point, we keep winning. And even if it takes a long time, we keep winning. And, like, I think we're going to win in the end too. Like more and more people are coming to this realization that this is a better way. And, medicine is good at what they do, but they suck at everything else.
just keep fighting.
Keep fighting. So, all right. Good stuff.
Loved it.